What is the most extreme case of an individual being sheltered that you've experienced? Serious. My roommate in college would call her mother to ask for permission to order a pizza. We lived 3 hours away from home and she was paying with her own money. I'm so curious what the grounds for granting or denying permission were. In my first year of university, I had a classmate from a very religious family who wasn't allowed to consume secular media. In one of our French classes, we played 20 questions as a speaking exercise. This girl was worried when her turn to guess came, because she hadn't heard of any of the celebrities, fictional characters, etc. that the other students had to guess. So, to give her a fighting chance, we decided that the person we have her guess would be the Prime Minister. Turned out she didn't know who the Prime Minister was. After her first year of university, she dropped out and decided to go to Bible college instead. I work in a hospital. 17-year girl is there for vomiting. Obviously pregnancy test comes back positive. To which she says that is an impossibility. Doctor asks her if she is sexually active, and her son in the room, who I thought was a brother or something, pipes up and says they have sex all the time. The girl had no idea that sex is what led to pregnancy. My friend's younger sister thought it was no big deal if she got pregnant because she could give it up for adoption as a fetus. As a student in Germany, my brother went on a trip to Köln with a group of other German and international student friends. They were having a good time and started drinking that evening. This Chinese lass wasn't used to alcohol whatsoever and couldn't manage a full bottle of Pilsner. After a while a few of them had fallen asleep, including this girl, so the awake ones did the classic drunken prank of drawing all over their friends. Upon waking, she noticed the others had been doodling on each other. She looked in the mirror to see the quintessential cartoon penis scrawled on her forehead, but was pretty bemused. "What is this?" she asked. "A penis," the others replied. "A what?" They ran through all the German slang words for penis. Dong, wang, but she wouldn't cotton on. "A mans, you know, that thing men have." A what? She'd grown up, achieved good grades and moved to the other side of the world, but had zero sex education. She wasn't embarrassed, annoyed or threatened, just confused. In the end they apologized, told her to forget it and helped her wipe it off. Whoa, they were actually really considerate in a weird way. Good for them for apologizing. While discussing teenager development in my nursing class, the instructor talked about monitoring your teen's texts, and told a story about how she saw texts mentioning doing 69 doggy and cowgirl on her daughter's phone and that she then had to have the sex talk with her. 40-year-old woman with 4 kids leaned over and asked what that meant. Another girl in the same class was bragging that she got pregnant so quickly after getting married because her husband's dong was so big that it went all the way up through her uterus and right to the ovary. She didn't know basic female anatomy. Scary thing for a nurse. The first one I could understand it if maybe she just didn't understand the slang and names of sex positions. I know a guy who isn't allowed to watch R-rated movies. He's 19. He isn't allowed to visit a friend's house unless he calls first to ask if they own a gun or smoke. He isn't allowed to ride with other people his age. He isn't allowed to walk around a store by himself, even if his parents are still with him in the store. He isn't allowed to play M-rated video games and most T-rated games. He isn't allowed to watch SpongeBob. He still has an enforced bedtime. In addition, he doesn't get the privileges of his parents doing his home responsibilities like a lot of other sheltering parents do. He makes most of his food and does most of his laundry. All of this has made him severely depressed, I think. You should convince him to save a bunch of money and then leave. A friend of mine who is 47, never had a girlfriend, not even sort of, never been on a date, never had sex or kissed a girl. Pretty sure he's never masturbated. I've never asked, but he's implied it. Lived at home until he was 39. And the only reason he moved is because his mother died and he couldn't afford the mortgage. He doesn't gamble but will ride with me to a casino occasionally. Every now and then, he will put a quarter into a slot machine and say something like, "I really figured I would win. My mother is looking down on me and that's something she would do. Let me hit a big jackpot to take care of me." The reason his mother had a double mortgage, I'm pretty sure, is she gambled to the point of being broke and took out loans against her house. He used to say things like that she would go to the casino with one roll of quarters and play all night, 4 or 5 nights per week because she knew which machines to play, and because they knew her at the casinos. They would just give her free steak dinners and tell her which machines were ready to pay off. And the coupons for free play that she got every month in the mail were because they liked her, etc. The odd part is, this was all self-inflicted. His mother was not controlling. He did it to himself. He acts like he believes nobody has sex until they are married. He doesn't watch R-rated movies. He also is very picky about food. Until recently, there were only literally about 4 or 5 things he would eat. He's beginning to break out of that a little, but he still has a long way to go. He's lucky to have you as a friend. My little brother has been friends with one of our neighbors for years. He comes from an extremely Christian family with 7 kids. Poor kid has basically never had anything to himself, not allowed to watch any non-educational TV. His parents briefly allowed Nickelodeon, then banned it again when they heard someone say shoot up in an episode of SpongeBob. You get the picture. He comes over our house a lot, where we expose him to all sorts of crap. Real cartoons. He loves Adventure Time, video games, etc. One time when I was still living at home, he stayed the night and I was running out to the store, so I brought them back ice cream. When I gave him his own pint of Ben & Jerry's, the damned kid didn't know what to do with himself. They are still friends, young teens now, and all in all they've been a great influence on each other. My brother exposes him to normal kid stuff and actual social skills, and he keeps my brother from being too wild. You and your brother sound like really nice people to hang around. You've definitely improved that boy's life significantly. The firstborn child of the people for whom my ex-wife used to nanny was the worst case of this I've ever seen. At the age of 15, his mother was still cutting his meat for him at every meal. He's in grad school now and still cannot tie his shoelaces. Well, technically that isn't true. He doesn't own any shoes with laces because he cannot tie them. He owns nothing but slip-ons and shoes with Velcro straps. He cannot prepare a meal. He buys all his food prepared, dines out, gets it delivered, etc. He can't change a flat tire, can't hammer a nail, operate a screwdriver, can't check the oil on his car, can barely pump his own gas. His parents did everything for him and consistently overrode the nanny when she tried to teach him to do things on his own. I was a preschool teacher and one of our students was the son of incredibly rich Saudis. He had servants. You'd say, tie your shoes, and he'd just stick out his foot and point at you. The saddest one I can think of is a girl in college who was homeschooled and very conservative. She had huge boobs and was basically always terrified by them because of modesty. She had no knowledge of bras and only had a couple very poorly fitting sports bras that gave her sores on her shoulders and torso. It took a lot of convincing from our friend group to get her to finally go buy her own bra and gasp let someone fit her. She had no idea there were different kinds of bra fits and styles, and it really improved her quality of life. I'm glad you could help her. It's really a shame that so many parents teach children to be ashamed of their bodies. It's not like she could help her enormous cans. Knew a girl, she had been homeschooled then joined us in grade school. She and her family were surprisingly normal. Her parents hadn't been religious fanatics or cultists or whatever and had obviously done a good job of teaching cause she was caught up and her grades were good. We didn't even know what the deal was or why they had chosen to homeschool her so long. Then we realized that she didn't know how to fall. One day at lunch she tripped and fell, but instead of doing anything to arrest her fall she just keeled over onto her face like a fainting goat. 1 minute vertical, the next, boom, horizontal, bleeding with a broken tooth. We thought it was weird, but then it happened multiple times with every fall, no matter how minor or preventable, being a really bad one, and almost immediately her parents went back to homeschooling her since she kept getting hurt. There was nothing wrong with this girl. She had no coordination problems or other physical or mental issues. She just sucked at falling down. We eventually found out after going over her house that everything was padded and child safe. No sharp edges or corners anywhere. There were foam mats on the floor in the kitchen, super padded carpet elsewhere, gym mats halfway up the walls. Almost nothing in the house was actually hard. Her parents were staggeringly physically overprotective to the point that her house was basically a slightly less plush bouncy castle. She had been so insulated for so long from any kind of repercussions of falling and hurting herself that she either never fully developed or had unlearned the reflex to put her arms out and stop herself. She came back in HS as a totally normal person and played softball. I don't know when her parents decided they were insane and needed to fix this weird, instinctless child they had created, but they had apparently let her develop normal human reflexes at some point. She just keeled over onto her face like a fainting goat. I know I shouldn't laugh, but holy crap, this made my day. I once knew a girl in high school who came from a strict Indian family. Some of her restrictions were, wasn't allowed to watch TV, listen to music, or really enjoy anything that other people did. I recall her mentioning she wasn't allowed to watch Full House, wasn't allowed to spend time with guys unless her father was present. Meeting up to work on projects outside of school wasn't an option for her, so she just teamed up with girls, wasn't allowed to participate in after school activities, field trips, or hang out with people outside of school. Didn't get her driver's license because her father didn't want her going anywhere. Wasn't allowed to get a job. Same reason as above. Absolutely no social media, cell phone, or internet use. Her father eventually let her use email for school purposes and applying to college. She didn't make a FB until college. She was absolutely oblivious to any slang, trends, etc. I smoked quite a bit in high school, and I remember one day she seriously asked me, "How do you do marijuana? Do you eat it?" Haven't been in touch with her since, but from what I can tell she's leading a pretty normal life now. Friend's 20-year-old sister had her mom make her a French bread pizza in the toaster oven. Mom went next door for 2 minutes. Got a phone call from the girl crying cause she was watching the pizza burn. Had no idea how to get it out or turn off the oven. My old roommate was raised in bumblefuck nowhere, Vermont. He got accepted into a school in Baltimore for college, Gauker I think. He had never seen a black person before. He had never had a taco before. He had never watched football before. He had never had alcohol before. He had no idea what YouTube was. This was in 2012. He still doesn't have a driver's license. My parents are fundamentalist Christians, and the majority of the kids I was allowed to hang out with came from homes with the same style of faith. There was this incredibly Flanders-esque family we grew up with. 3 sons, all of their names beginning with the same letter. They weren't allowed to watch football on TV because it was too violent. They'd never heard of The Simpsons. Were completely forbidden to play any video game that had blood in it. And here's one of the worst ones. They had a microphone on their computer that could record your voice. This was 1997, and I was like, oh, this will be funny, and I said cuff into the mic and then played it in reverse so it said frick. Their son laughed along with me and then said, what does frick mean? He was at least 12. I love how Flanders is used to describe very religious people. A girl I knew in high school wasn't allowed to read any of the Harry Potter books or even watch the movies because her parents were super against the idea of witchcraft. I was that kid. In 3rd grade my teacher would read a little from a book at the end of the day. Well, the class decided on Harry Potter. My mother had always been very clear I was not supposed to read that book, and my stepdad's mom worked in the same school. So we read a different book. Sorry, 3rd grade class. My mom was an idiot. I had a friend in high school, let's call him Bobby. Bobby's parents had fostered their 2 nephews before any of the biological kids were born. Since the nephews had been in and out of care with very little parental guidance, they were stereotypically rebellious teenagers, smoking, staying out late, petty vandalism, etc. When Bobby's mom was pregnant with him, she decided she'd impose strict rules on her son and his younger siblings, so they wouldn't end up as deviant as her fosters. They lived way out in the country, about 15-20 miles from the nearest town, above 500 people. Bobby didn't have internet in the house. We graduated in 2008, and he wasn't allowed to use the phone. When we were on summer vacation, he could only communicate with me by writing letters. I ran into him in the library parking lot one summer and his parents wouldn't let him roll down the car window to talk to me. He wasn't allowed to watch any television or listen to the radio unless it was playing country or Christian music. When I asked what he did in his free time, he said as soon as school was over, he worked in his family's junkyard until he was tired enough to go to bed. We took a lot of art classes together, and he was skilled in drawing. His family's income could have gotten him enough aid to go to college. The local community college had a good design program, but they refused to allow him to go because they said he was too disabled to handle it. He had dyslexia and ADHD. Ran into him once I had finished a couple years of college. He was still living at home, working in the junkyard without pay, asking his parents' permission to leave the property at the age of 22. Funny, or sad, thing. Since he wasn't really allowed to participate in pop culture, he didn't understand much slang. Once, he got the idea that MILF was a slang word like homie or dog. He walked around the hallways saying, "What up, MILF," to his classmates till someone corrected him. A girl in my high school had to step out of class once because her parents didn't allow her to use YouTube and even went as far to tell the teachers she couldn't, even though this was some educational science video. Well then, mirror that video on Pornhub or something. I had a friend who drank Seltzer water all through high school because his parents told him it was the same thing as Coca-Cola. It was tough breaking the news to him. Think of all that high fructose corn syrup he missed out on. Not sure if it was sheltered, but she had some crazy ass family dynamic going on. The scene. A fairly notorious huge old 15-bedroom student house right across the road from the most popular student bar in a university city. One landline phone is the days before cell phones were even a thing. 5 times a night without fail the operator would interrupt someone else's phone call so her batshit crazy mother could scream down the phone about some emergency. In the end we told her to frick off. Her parents and 6 much younger siblings lived about 45 minutes away and would regularly swarm through the house demanding to know where she was and what she was doing. Sitting in her room studying like she always does. One time they picked her up, took her God knows where for the weekend. She had parked her car behind mine and apparently her dad had not allowed her to take 15 seconds to move it. Luckily the lads got together and picked it up and wedged it between the building next door and the fence where it couldn't be moved unless you also found 8 big strong boys who can lift a car if they were so inclined. She wasn't allowed to watch TV or listen to the radio. Had to call her parents when she was leaving for classes and when she got home. This story sounds far less sheltered and far more borderline abusive. Reddit. Allow me to introduce you to one of my roommates in college. I transferred to a college in Boston after my freshman year. My roommate was also a transfer student from a different part of MA. Her parents told me, when she stepped out of the room, that she had never spent a night without a family member present and that they had kept her home for a year at a local college because they just couldn't let her leave yet. Over the course of the year, mainly because she was so sheltered, she proved herself to be an ingrown hair on the genitals of life. Here are a few shining examples. I was trying to figure out if I could afford to study abroad. She told me that she didn't feel the need to travel because she had been to Epcot. I smoked at the time. She asked me not to store my lighter and my cigarettes together because it could make the dorm burn down. Decided to sleep with her boyfriend for the first time. Wanted him wear a condom for the whole date leading up to the sex in case he forgot to put it on later. Told the RA I had weed in the room because she had never seen loose leaf tea before. It was in the bag from the tea shop. Clearly labeled green tea. Almost did burn the dorm down because no one ever told her that metal doesn't go in the microwave. Claimed that it was the dorm's cheap microwave's fault because it never does that when my mom microwaves my food. Asked me if it was hard to learn a third language since I was minoring in Spanish. I am Mexican. I speak Spanish. She honestly thought Mexicans don't speak Spanish and used the fact that she had been to both the Mexican and Spanish pavilions at Epcot to bolster her argument. Sounds like she was just stupid, not sheltered. I was invited to a block party barbecue to meet the neighbors in the area I had just moved to. A couple, who were acquaintances of the host, had a baby on the strictest schedule I've ever heard of. I'm talking she only has 6 minutes to drink her bottle. Strict at exactly the 6-minute mark they took the bottle away. Burped her for exactly 3 minutes followed by a 1 hour 15-minute nap. Woke her up exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes later and then we were only allowed to socialize with the baby for a very specific amount of time before she was to be let down in an enclosure for timed alone playtime. Both parents had a smartwatch that kept displaying countdowns to the next event the baby was to experience. The entire time they were going off about how she is the smartest baby ever. No matter how we tried to change the convo, some random alarm would go off and then they will bring up the baby genius. I felt terrible for that baby's life. I went to a military boarding school. We had a kid transfer in from a strict homeschooled his whole life situation. When he was in 11th grade, for whatever reason his parents decided it was time for him to leave. To sum it up, the use of swear words made him cry. Not even directed at him, if he even overheard them in a conversation that had nothing to do with him. My 17-year-old cousin. His stepmom and I were looking at my aunt's fish tank, and then the fish started having sex and the mom covered my cousin's eyes and tried pulling him out of the room. She wasn't joking either. She was dead serious. I don't know how fish have sex, but I suspect a sheltered kid wouldn't even recognize it as sex. My boyfriend's mom logs onto his and his other siblings' social media websites. She spends all day browsing on them and has even gone as far as making posts pretending to be them. It creeps me out. That's the point where I'd make a separate secret account. A coworker who is 25 realized one day during lunch that not everyone went to the beach during the summer like she did with her family. I had to be like, did you know? Some people don't go anywhere at all? I'm 22 and after seeing a picture of a 100-year-old woman feeling the ocean for the first time, it blew my mind that some people go their whole lives without ever seeing the ocean or a real beach. It just never occurred to me that people living in middle America might never take a trip out to the sea. 28-year-old woman in the army, single mother, got pregnant at age 18 and didn't know how it happened. She found out from the doctor that sex leads to pregnancy. She also found out from the doctor that what she and her boyfriend had been doing was called sex. Her mother had kept her so sheltered from anything remotely resembling sex education that she had no idea. It gets worse though. Somehow, she spends the next 10 years learning nothing else about sex, and, amazingly, doesn't get pregnant. However, she was convinced swallowing semen or anal sex would lead to pregnancy as the sperm goes into the belly either way. She also didn't believe an STD could be transmitted via oral or anal, because STDs were diseases that happened down there. I discovered all this when giving one of those mandatory sex ed classes to the troops, the generic, wrap it or you will end up with the AIDS. And she pulled me aside after to ask me questions because what was said in the class didn't match up with what she had been told believed. The scariest thing about the whole thing wasn't the lack of knowledge. It was that she was afraid to sleep with guys who used condoms because she thought it meant the guy had an STD and was trying to hide it. Had a roommate who was homeschooled all her life. She decided to move in with my boyfriend and I because she wanted to be independent. She had a lot of trouble with managing her money, so we helped her make a budget, which was interesting because she insisted she couldn't pay more than $200 month rent, all utilities, internet and food included, because she needed $500 month for fun money. Eventually she got really mad in December when we asked for rent. She had thought it would be free for Christmas and had planned on using her rent money for presents. We explained that's not how it works. We still needed to pay rent. If she didn't, we would have to pay her share, which isn't cool. She got upset, went and locked herself in her room for the night. I didn't think anything of it since she was prone to these tantrums, until I went to go to bed and my dog went to her door and started whining. I knocked and called for her. Nothing. Finally I used the emergency key she'd given me after 5 minutes. She was on the floor, naked, in a pool of puke, empty large bottle of vodka beside her. I call 911, get her an ambulance, and sit with her, make sure she's okay, call her parents, etc. At the hospital the docs said she had serious alcohol poisoning and would have died. Her mom and dad are screaming at my BF and I for causing her to do this by not giving her free rent for Christmas since they always had. When she sobers up, we found out that she didn't know about alcohol poisoning. Her parents had never explained or taught her. She goes home with them and decided to move back home, which was okay, except she left her stuff at our place for 2 months with no rent, and then got harassed by her and her parents for not paying her ambulance bill since we called it. There were so many things she was completely clueless on. Technology, life and responsibilities, finances, even sex ed. She had a boyfriend and they were sexually active, but she didn't know about STDs or STDs. I get that she was homeschooled, but I feel like there still needs to be a mandatory curriculum and testing. I'm very curious about what specifically she wanted to spend $500 a month in fun money on, especially if it didn't include food. Aged 18. A girl from school told me that mailer in To Kill a Mockingbird couldn't have been raped because she wasn't pregnant. The same girl also told me that girls ought to carry around a condom in case they were raped. Upon tasting grape juice, she asked me if it was wine. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.